So, can anyone hear me? Okay. I'll pretend like I did not hear you. Okay. Let's start. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. First thing, this debate can't be about whether there won't be no God or there is an existence of God or not. This debate is critiquing the value judgments that exist within these things. What is the value in religion? And would we have a better life without religion in itself? Will we survive as humanity if there is a non-existence of religion, or will we have evolved past the point where we are currently if there's no religion? For any upside to win today's debate, they need to prove that religion itself has been the major aid for human evolution. If we prove on our side Gov that human would have evolved without religion and we continue to evolve without religion, we most likely win today's debate. First things first. The first thing you need to critique in this debate is it that religion in itself is the sole existing structure to critique things like morality and moral frameworks. The question then becomes, which structure is best able to critique morality? First things first, we believe, one, government itself has every incentive to critique things like morality, right? Because there is a creation of things like the criminal justice system in order to create a structured society, or for us to have a society that has less crimes and whatnot within society. But then second thing is that human nature in itself has things like conscience, right? Consciences that necessarily pricks us whenever we are able to create things like bad things. It means if you most likely kill somebody, you know within yourself that killing is bad and you most likely don't want to do this. It means there's always going to be a structure to critique something like morality and what's not in itself. But then the question then is what is the problem that exists within religion, and why do we feel religion has caused a huge lot of problem and would have existed without religion? First things first is on human dignity. We believe that the existence of religion itself has impeded on the dignity of humans within society. First, religion preys upon materialistic wealth of the rich and says, oh, you have to do things like get conversion and what's not, because it says we want to emancipate, we want to spread out and spread forth within society. The reason why this is problematic is simple. It means then that the rich controls the welfareism of how the structures of religion within itself, right? The rich says, I'll dictate how religion necessarily operates within those particular systems. This is the reason why you have individuals within society using religion as a tool for political agenda and as a tool to create a system that necessarily favors them. But the second thing is this: religion also tells you that as a poor, you have to pay tithes to God. You have to pay tithe and offering. The issue is these individuals are poor. There is 1% of rich people that exist within the world. This religion doesn't critique their necessary state, right? It says, look, we are going to give to you things like charity, but then in exchange, you have to give us 10% of your wealth within that particular regard. It becomes even much more problematic for individuals to fend up for themselves. But then the reason why that is much more bad is that these guys are much more indoctrinated within this particular system and within this particular world, meaning there is no legitimacy to opt out, because it gives you a false sense of security that says we have to necessarily do this in order for us to make hell or heaven. But the third thing is this, right? The religion legitimately uses individual as a tool for fighting. This is why it's problematic. This is it, right? In vast majority of instances, government and every other society wields religion as a tool, right? We say, for you to go to heaven, you have to participate in suicide bombing and what's not. And that's the reason why, terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS and what's not, could use individuals to carry out or perpetrate their action of violence, because they tell them that, look, you are doing Allah's work and you most likely go to heaven for this particular thing. We believe that religion itself has been a tool for the perpetration of violence, and in itself has created an ecosystem where individuals are unable to thrive in vast majority of instances, and it's much more problematic. But then the thing is this, the fourth thing on this is simple, right? We believe that religion also like incentivizes power abuse within systems. The reason why it's bad is this, right? The reason why it looks like this is how it looks like. It says you have to always obey the authority, but then even if you challenge them, you can't challenge them on a hard ground, especially when there's corruption within society. This is the reason why countries like Iran, nobody can necessarily stand up to challenge the monarch because you believe that he's a divine authority from God. This is the reason why even the Christians within Nigeria most likely ignore politics because you believe that you most likely should not challenge government, or there should be a way for you to challenge government. You shouldn't take the hard stance in challenging government because you are calling out constituted authority and you are not respecting them. The reason why it is problematic is this. This in itself essentially incentivizes these guys to continue or perpetuate their acts of things like corruption or things like violence. This is the reason why you continuously have people not calling them out within society, but then even if people call them out, it is not enough for them to necessarily enact things like change and whatnot within that particular space. It is even much more problematic in that particular regard. But then the reason why it is even worse is that religion tells you that, like vast majority of instances, it gives like preachers more power over a good lot of people. The reason why it is problematic is simple. These preachers uses these individuals as a tool to perpetrate their own crimes, right? They tell you, you have to follow our word and you have to follow the word of God. You have to be simple, you have to do this particular thing in order for you to make heaven or for you to make hell. The reason why it is even much more problematic is this, right? This indoctrination means that religious leaders have so much power and they have no accountability for this particular thing because they could easily use God as an excuse. This is the reason why you have somebody like Odumeje do things like have things like crimes and what's up with this society, but then it's just looked at as like people, he continues to still have things like buy in and what's up for people to in his church, and he continues to perpetrate his own acts of violence. We believe that in a world where this system never existed, individuals would have been much more better off because one, you have government as the sole power and the sole person to monopolize things like violence. It means then that individuals can actively call out governmental structures more and governmental structures better. It means then that the system there wouldn't be a system where there can be a system where individuals wouldn't be able to attain this type of call out mechanism and whatnot. But then another thing is this, right? We believe religion in vast majority of instances is largely conservative. If religion has never existed, things like the feminist movement would have most likely thrived right from the start. But then women will most likely have gotten their emancipation right from the start. We believe that the existence of religion is what is the problem that existed within this world, and humanity would have been better off without it. We are proud to propose.
My speech now. It's essential to note that regardless of the existence of religion, life is always going to be unpredictable, which is essentially why we tend to need some form of hope and some of things to look up to for us to change. Now, I'll go into my framing on why all of this is extremely important. And also, it's also essential to know that we live in a very globalized system. Therefore, it means you have access to more information, yet we still have significantly larger parts of society being more conservative. Now, what's the existence of religion, or why is religion so strong within society? Firstly, we believe the strength of religion is gotten from the intangible nature of it. The idea that you can't prove the existence of God, the idea that you have no idea what kind of punishment you're going to get. Why is this very essential? The reason why we think this is essential is that makes religion a very powerful force in propagating good beliefs and good norms within society. And the implication of this is that they're able to propagate beneficial behaviors within society, things like charity, things like treating individuals as equal as yourself. It's also essential to note in our framing that various religions exist within status quo. It means you're likely going to buy into the one that you believe in. Now, they can't come and say you grew up in a particular household because we live in a globalized community. Therefore, you likely have access to several information that would tie you back into whatever beliefs you have. And even if that didn't exist, humans tend to have a natural cognitive bias towards going away from things that are necessarily harmful to them. Therefore, you're likely to find a religion that suits yourself. We also need to understand that the vast majority of religions, the reason why this is important is that these are likely the religions that a vast majority of society buys into. Things like the Abrahamic religion that exists within status quo. Most of these religions usually propagate things like charity, things like treating your neighbor as yourself. Therefore, it means these individuals' natural core beliefs are very important. Now, God can't argue that because religion has been used as a tool, which is basically their primary case. God can't argue that because religion has been used as a tool for oppression, the world is going to be better without it. Because without logic, we can also say democracy should never have existed, considering the general harms that democracy has also created in society. However, because we realize that choice is necessarily important. Another second response to that is also the communism. Communism on itself is not necessarily bad. However, people like Stalin was able to use it to propagate more harms within society. So with that logic, you cannot say because something has been used as a tool, something should not exist. Truth or POI?
The debate is about organized religion, not religion itself. So why is organized religion bad?
Well, again, everything I've mentioned, I literally said Abrahamic religions, and Christians and Islam, as far as I'm aware, are pretty much organized religions. So anyways, moving on, even though we have several atheists within some community, most of them are still in the minority. This is because there's empirical evidence within society that many people need a stronger force that they cannot topple over for them to actually believe in something, for them to actually take beneficial action within society. Why do you think on our side of the house, organized religion is much more effective in reducing societal harm? We think religion creates two things: two level of stoppage, or two level of normative forms to stop you from creating harms within society. Firstly, religion tends to propagate things like feelings of guilt, the idea that you're probably going to be punished in the afterlife if you commit harms within society. Therefore, it means you're likely going to be driven internally by guilt. The second mechanism is CJS system. Now, why is the CJS system significantly ineffective? We think guilt is very effective because you cannot run away from yourself. It's literally intrinsic. You cannot escape yourself. However, with the CJS system, if you have enough money, if you have enough status in society, you can necessarily escape from that. But then with organized religion, it tends to keep you more grounded within society. Therefore, we think on our side, you're likely able to propagate a more stable society, a more beneficial society. Secondly, we believe another reason for organized religion is the idea that you can have individuals with similar opinions as yourself. Therefore, it means you likely, again, that brings me back to my point, where you likely end up with individuals that you believe you have similar beliefs with. Which means, this brings me to my second point. Religion is not static. Religion is like any other concept. Even organized religions are also not static. Organized religions are not static, and they are basically proofs of this. Considering we now have people like female imams, people like gay rights being accepted into several organized religions. Therefore, in status quo, religion itself is not a static system. It's not a system where because we said this, religion basically grows alongside humanity. Therefore, regardless of you being an organized system, you still grow alongside community. Therefore, there's at least we've seen evidence of a lot of improvements within religion. We still think this is absolutely essential. Why do we think this is beneficial? Considering the idea that many individuals want to feel like when they die, there's probably some form of sovereignty towards themselves. There's some form of compensation for having good behavior, because human beings naturally do not do things out. Considering how intrinsically many people have a selfish nature, therefore they likely want to take actions and prioritize themselves. However, with organized religion, especially with the kind of messages that it sends to society, these individuals now have some form of sovereignty, some form of looking forward towards something. This is very important, considering the idea that many people still try to fight for rights within organized religion. That shows you the essential powers within this religion. This is extremely important. This is extremely important considering the idea that, again, religion is tied. Organized religion helps you feel significant within society. It helps you feel like your entire lifestyle is not pointless. You're not going to die without any form of benefit, which is because people are driven by hope and things like that, which is very essential. We think we prefer a world like that because the alternative harm is where organized religion doesn't exist. In their world, or that side of the house where organized religion doesn't exist, there's a very strong likelihood of, when organized religion doesn't exist, there's a very strong likelihood of individuals who are very oppressive in society are unlikely to feel any form of harm. They have nothing to make them try to look good within society. Considering the core principles of a lot of organized religions that has a massive following within society, they tend to propagate more good behaviors of these capitalistic individuals, which is why they're likely to give out massive charities because they want to look good within society. This is extremely important because on our side of the house, we show you that there's more solvency for marginalized people within society. On our side of the house, there's more accountability of individuals who are rich, people that are capitalistic by nature, because they want to look good. They want to feel like they belong to that community. They want to look good within that society. Considering the idea that many people believe that there has to be something in the afterlife, these individuals want to look good within society as well. Therefore, we think there's likelihood of them curtailing a lot of their bad behaviors within society as a result of the organized religion. Because a coalition of people, it means there's likelihood of things like collective punishment from the religious society when you go against individuals like that.
Thank you, Sorry, thank you, DCM.
Hey, God, I beg. And that didn't see me. Please check. Can you see me? Like that stuff. Can you cut some now? Can you wait? Sorry, how do you do this?
You just drop it on the table from here.
Oh, okay. I'm going to start my speech. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, sorry. Where's CO? Where's OO? Oh, okay, cool. All right, I'm going to prioritize POI from CO. Yeah. So, just to flush out your extension, I think that is like that should be there are two things. Okay, sorry. I've not started the timer. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1, go. Hadiza makes a very big problem, a very big mistake when she argues this debate on the basis of whether religion is beneficial or not. I don't think that this is the crux of the debate, right? Because I think they need to argue on the existence of whether it has been the overall judgment and evaluation of religion right from existence, right, till date. If the harms is something that is beneficial to society or to humanity at the end of the day, and whether it outweighs the harms, if the benefit outweighs the harm from their side of the house, which is something they never do, and that is the reason why opening opposition is losing today's debate. But let's go into what they argue, like a couple of things. I think that religion has been a metric to dehumanize others by things like their membership of an exclusion or an exclusive community, right? And the assurance of things like profits or benefits at the end of the day. We think that it has given individuals the ability to defend things like mass genocide and things like the eradication of an entire race on the basis of religion in and of itself. It's one that preaches that any other religion that isn't necessarily yours, something that is illegitimate to happen, or probably illegitimate to exist within society at the end of the day, and so you should necessarily not interact with those particular individuals. We think that it is primarily a problem. But notice a bunch of things Temini tells you, and this is probably an extension of his cases, right? The reason why you can't buy any of their cases, when they tell you about people having, it's very important because it's a space where you have similar opinions. Guys, literally, you could necessarily have other factors or probably other spaces where you have meaningful conversations that doesn't necessarily entail locking your space or necessarily within the confines of religion. Within it happens in spaces like things like educative sectors, or probably within, say, seminars or any other secular mechanisms that exist within society. We don't necessarily think that that is an exclusive benefit that necessarily should have win within today's debate. But the idea of hope is something that is necessarily cannot happen within today's debate, and I'm going to prove that. Why doesn't any of their case work? Firstly, I think that it's the creation of echo chambers, right? Echo chambers of oppression that necessarily exist. By definition of orthodox beliefs, right, we think that it creates an outgroup that has justified the persecution of things like the Inquisition, of things like witch trial that existed, right, to things like modern discrimination that you now have at the end of the day against individuals like LGBTQ plus individuals, and tagging these individuals as blasphemies or probably against religion, and calling them or demonizing them that they are going to go to hell, all those kinds of things. What does this do? A world without religion and why it is better. One, we think that without their rigid institutional identities, right, it's going to look like, say, human tribalism would have been less potent, right? Things like it would have been less divinely justified. So you wouldn't have necessarily had individuals actively defending genocide at the end of the day, which is something that is problematic, right? But it most likely looks like, say, avenue for things like expression, right? That leads to you're going to have much more better avenues that leads to significant you're going to have avenues for things like, say, expression, better forms of expression that necessarily leads to a significant reduction in things like, say, identity-based violence that existed. For example, what you had in Iraq or Iran, where you necessarily have the constant marginalization of women that necessarily try to reach out for things like liberties that necessarily every individual within society have a right to, right, because you exist as a rational person at the end of the day. So there's an obligation for society or humanity to give you at least access to basic rights. But secondly, I think that it abuses and assaults things like the autonomy of individuals, right? Because the basic idea of a group, when it is formed, right, is that it has to be on the protection of individuals that ascribe to it and also validate themselves through that particular religion. The problem is that on their side of the house, even when they say, oh, it's for protecting individuals, they assault the individuals who buy into those particular religion in itself. And that's the reason why they can't necessarily win this debate, right? Because, but however, right, the problem is religion abuses their own members, like we've told you. And the prominent example is, for example, the Catholic Church sex abuse scandal, right? It's a prime example of an institution that necessarily prioritizes things like their own power and their own reputation over the safety of its individual. It's these structures, it's the structures that enables the cover-up of biases or probably the cover-up of controversies that necessarily don't necessarily benefit individuals or members of those particular ideologies. What does then happen within, what happens when this doesn't exist? We think that without these powerful, unaccountable institutions, right? Because we say that they are unaccountable, such as systemic abuse would be harder to perpetrate, but it's going to be even more harder to justify at the end of the day. So you now have a community or a society that can focus on things like better relationships and much more better ways to sustain relationships and interactions at the end of the day. Why? But the idea is, even if they say, oh, this is very important because it analyzes morality, why is it that morality on our side of the house is something that is much more better? One, secularism now becomes the order of the day, right? Where you have the consequences of your action to other individuals is necessarily something that you're going to weigh, right? So most likely you're not able to justify certain harms that exist within society. But two, what you do to other people is that the evolution of religion in itself is something that is very, very slow, right? We think that there needs to be a system that caters to the diverse preferences of individuals, because people are not homogeneous, right? We think that the vast majority of people are heterogeneous, and they have diverse principles and preferences and preferences at the end of the day, which means that we're better able to say humanity in itself is now way beneficial because it creates a mechanisms or structures that is able to tailor towards and cater towards the diverse preferences of individuals within society. But I think the most important thing is that you now don't have a theological justification for when people do things like, say, justify slavery or or continuously fight against things like marriage rights or reproduction at the end of the day. I think the comparative is, even if they say, oh, secularism is, like our world is bad, because all these problems still exist, the better comparative is, humanity would have been way better, because we're going to, like, we're better able to do things like call governmental structures. There's an incentive for government to do better policies because of things like re-election. At the end of the day, checks and balances exist. People cannot call these structures to power, because individuals are very that's the end of my speech. Sorry.
Thank you. Getting your position to explain how and move it closer to my speech.
Here's timer. Okay. Starting my speech. Sorry. Starting my speech in POIs in my 5th minute. If you have any POI closing opposition, I'm closing government rather. Please I'm prioritizing you guys. So we can at least have some sort of engagement. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, first of all, opening government cannot come and tell us that this debate cannot be about God, or at least some inclusiveness of God in it. Why do we say this from opening opposition? Because God and an establishment of a divine authority is literally what religion is premised upon. It's like saying we cannot discuss democracy without the government, with the government. It makes no sense. Now, moving on to the bulk of their cases. They talk about, summary of their cases is that we get that religion isn't the sole structure to critique morality, and then you have your conscience. Panel, first off, the harm that this already does is that it overburdens the CJS, the criminal justice system. Now, let's even go into their core argument, which is about conscience and morality. First off, from opening opposition, we believe that conscience is weak and subjective. Why? Because your conscience is most likely going to be based on your personal experiences and your situational experiences, meaning things that have currently happened to you or are happening to you would determine what you see or what your conscience will term as good or bad. Example is this, panel, in extension with our analysis. If somebody has lived in a war-torn country all their life, all they've ever seen is killing, all they've ever seen is their parents killed in front of them, to them killing is not going to be bad because they see it as a means of self-preservation and continuity of existence. Now, another thing you get from them is that, now what do you see from, what does organized religion do to conscience? Now let's flip that argument and show you how it's even better on our side. Religion strengthens conscience. What it does is that it shows people that there is a reason why this thing is bad, and there is an higher authority that will critique you if you decide to do this thing. So the conscience they're even clamoring for is strengthened on our own side of the world, because religion already shows you that there are consequences to your actions. Even if the CGS system shows that there are consequences to these actions, because of the overburdening of the CGS systems and because of the corrupt officials and corrupt people and power breaches, like my partner already tells you, it means that there is now an incentive to want to make them do this more, which is what religion provides, a more impact and more strengthening of this conscience. Next argument that they try to say is that it's harder for poor people because poor people are already poor, and then they say have to give 10% and the rich people have to give all their money. That's a big fat lie. Why? Because it's not compulsory for you to give back to religion. Religion states itself in a way that giving back to it makes it look like you are doing good. What does it then mean for you as an individual? What this means is that you seek some sort of self
dignity and self-actualization, because you now begin to feel good about yourself. And this feeling good now leads to the production of, feel-good hormones that can make you even perform better at work. Why? Because of these things directly or indirectly contribute to your productivity and the way you see yourself and your idea and self-esteem of yourself as a person. Now, moving on. Another thing is that if they claim that these people are poor, what then is 10% of their money going to even do for them in the first place? It's like saying I'm earning only 1,000 naira. 10% of 1,000 naira is literally 100 naira. How does 100 naira better the lives of the people that they clamor for so much? How does it advance their life? How does it make it easier? How does it make it better for them? They were most likely going to waste that money or anything. So that kind of argument, you can't even buy it from opening government. Another thing they talk about now is that religion uses humans. Give me a minute. Religion, fifth minute, please. It's 3. Religion uses human as a tool for fighting to perpetrate personal crimes, and that religion, they used to commit violence. Panel, please note that religion is not the reason why violence occurs. First of all, humans have different opinions in society. What this means is that there would always be clashes among humans in societies. 10 people in a room will never agree on the same thing. Not because of humans would always go against themselves, but because we can't all agree on the same thing. We weren't all raised in the same place. We weren't all, characterized by the same circumstances. Meaning that this difference in circumstances and upbringing will lead to difference in ideas. This difference in ideas can sometimes lead to clashes. Now, to engage the core of their examples and analysis on the ISIS and everything, those were political and economic crimes, not even religious. Religion was just used as the cover-up. Another flip for this argument, to show them why they will lose on this argument, is that what religion now does, religion is used as the cover-up, organized religion. When you take away this organized religion, it means you take away the cover-up. It means you expose the government for what it truly is. What it then means is that the people now begin to lose more hope that they already had in the failing government. The people now begin to want to go against the government. Now they were trying to argue that this will cause change. But panel, just because I think NSAS is bad and I went out to protest does not mean that it will literally stop. There are other things that they have to analyze or mechanize and show how this thing would make them stop, or show how this thing will solve the problem of the bad government. And lastly, they talk about monopolistic government and how the religion can call out government and how it incentivizes corruption, and because they see leaders as a divine blah blah blah, and that government is the sole power of monopoly. Like, because government has all the power, government now people can call out the government more. Panel, please note, this monopolistic power already occurs in China presently. How are the people currently calling out? I'm not taking you guys, I'm taking you. Okay, shoot.
The last paragraph, the last line of the first paragraph, they are distinct from personal spirituality or individual belief which may exist independently of institutions. Defend the existence of religious institutions, not religion itself.
We're not defending religion itself. It's not even religious institution that the debate is about. The debate is about organized religions. You think it's giving examples like Christianity and Islam. So I don't know what maybe CG is trying to come and run in this debate. Like, maybe we're supposed to prove about institutions, about maybe the churches or the mosques or this thing. It clearly states what these organized religions look like and what they are currently in society. Maybe they want to come and run disorganized religions or religion in stratas. First off, we believe that this is unstable. This lacks coherence. This lacks, mutual cohesivity, meaning that they will not even be able to get a lot more done in public because they will be easily shunned. They will be easily taken apart because they lack a proper hierarchical structure and foundation in society. Sorry, it's my 6 minutes. Now, lastly, what they talk about is that panel, the government being a monopolistic state already adds to the corruption that they will face. It means that what you give the government a bigger incentive to write on the beliefs of these people, you give them more power, because religion is one big call-out mechanism that the government has that can call out the government on these bad deeds. If they talk about protest, we see it happening, but it's not currently efficient. They needed to have shown us why that is the most efficient way. And lastly, they say religion is conservative. Religion is rapidly advancing. Like my partner already tells you. You see, religion is rapidly advancing. How? You see things like gay Catholic priests committing, they are now commissioning gay marriages. It means that religion are saying that it needs to help the society and help the people. What is the core of religion? To help the people give a better life. And they are not saying that there is a need for them to be inclusive to these societies. Religion are saying that there is a lot more for them to do and help their citizens. Now, what are the arguments against my partner? Why are we not better off with organized religion? Because one, there will be an imbalance in society and its operation. Two, it doesn't necessarily address the problems on ground that OG and maybe CG will come to state. Three, there is a destabilization of constitutional laws which are premised on morality. So are we not going to abandon every single thing that we have gotten? Four, it is better than any material incentive as it pushes people to be better because of what it is premised upon, which is morality and consequences. Proudly opening opposition.
Yeah. Not very proud of you for doing your time, but thank you. MG. So for POIs, just put your hand up. I eventually get to you. What is that? Starlight, your timer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So I will prioritize closing. For, okay. So start. Do you have an iPhone code? No. Okay. iPhone. iPhone code.
Yeah, it has a Type-C port as well.
Please also borrow me that make sure you are bringing up. My phone don't die, don't be saying one day. Wait, this place should not take place.
Whether or not they work is a question for later.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay, like I said, our priorities getting from CG for reasons, sorry, CO for reasons that will become, for reasons that will be, no, I said I'm prioritizing CO for reasons that will become apparent in my speech. Starting in 3, 2, 1. To take away the entirety of opening half from this debate. The reason why OO falls out of this debate, and again, very frustratingly, is that this debate is about organized religion and not necessarily religion itself. Like the info slide says, you still have personal spirituality and individual beliefs. This means that regardless of whether institutions, like say the Catholic Church, for example, or the institution of the Sultanate within Saudi Arabia exists, like you would still have religion. The reason why OG are opening fallouts, like there are a few things, but I think the most important one is that there's a lack of mech in a lot of things they say. They say that, well, it's easier for you to co-opt these institutions, they don't explain why we roll. But two, the vast majority of their case relies on one premise, that these religious institutions are bad. I don't think they prove that premise, but our effects extension happens regardless of the premise. How does organized religion grow? It usually exists and grows out of the culture within which the religion was formed. So what this looks like is that the Hebrew culture primarily influenced things like Judaism until they became a structure around it. It looks like, Western culture primarily influenced early stage Christianity, that's why it is. But secondly, for religion to exist and constantly exist, it needs solid and unchanging doctrine. Because in a world where these institutions change their doctrine a lot, it's more likely that they fail. The reason why this is already bad, and regardless of whether these institutions are good or bad, is that in our world you have more proximate religion. What we mean by this is that for the vast majority of people, you opt into a religion, the institution pushes the same ideals that are themselves grown out of the culture in which the religion originally evolves from, but you have no ability to opt out, so you never feel fully part of that religion. The intuition pump for this, for example, is that the institution around Islam tells you that for your deen to be complete, you have to make a trip to Mecca. If you live around Saudi Arabia, which necessarily was the center of the culture then, it probably makes sense and it's easy for you to do so. If you live in backwater Nigeria, you are never able to access that thing because of situations around your life. What happens in our world is that religious beliefs and ideas are much more flexible to individuals, which means that you're more likely to determine things that are proximate to your needs, proximate to things that are most important to you, but it also means that religion that you then choose is something that is of more value to you and greatly impacts your actualization. I think the next thing to talk about here, so the first thing is we already have happier and more fulfilled people within our world, because when you have organized religion, it's only people who grew up within the same cultural circumstances as the religion in its early stage that are able to accept that doctrine and perform it perfectly. You never get that in your world. The second reason why people are better, like humanity is just better in our world, is the idea of change. So I think these guys talk a lot about, how are people receptive to change, but they never give you the mechanical legwork as to why that exists. So the first thing to talk about here is that individuals are often more responsive and flexible to change than institutions. Institutions thrive on things like consistency, and especially ideological consistency. But oftentimes this is something that's spearheaded by people at the head of those institutions because they necessarily benefit from the system that already exists here. This is not a conversation about whether these institutions are good or bad. It's a conversation about whether or not they have an incentive to continue to maintain the same beliefs. But the second thing here is that religious institutions often greatly advertise to people to stay within the same center of doctrine, which is why anytime you want to opt out of the classic or mainstream doctrine, they likely do things like excommunicate you. They say it's blasphemy. They say you're wrong and you shouldn't do this. It is much easier to convince individuals when they don't have an institution that constantly feeds them the same doctrine, one. But two, it's much easier to convince individuals than it is to convince institutions, because institutions have some incentive for consistency. Have fun.
Why is this extremely bad for humanity as a collective compared to most side of the world?
I was getting to that, so a little patience may have saved that POI. Right, so let's talk about why this is bad. There are lots of changes that we've needed to have in society that is aligned to. Our world is one where people are more likely to feel fulfilled in religion, given they're going to be in religion in both worlds. But two is one where they're more likely to say, like, what they call it? It's one where they're more likely to then, it's one where they're just more likely to interact with people better. The second thing here is that institutions often weaponize the idea of us with them, because this is an exclusive metric, for which they're able to make sure that people align closer with them rather than other people. In a world where religion is personally and individually defined, you don't have that metric, because the religion is just about you. You don't care about winning over other people. Your only priority is whether or not you feel fulfilled. Proud TG.
We invite a member of the opposition to introduce the final team. Again, just a reminder that routes like this are far better where there is engagement. So I again encourage you to ask the viewers.
Give me a second. Am I supposed to thank you just like here? Yeah. Wait, I'm supposed to thank you just.
Drop it safe.
Fine. Okay then. I'm going to be starting my speech now. Oh, sorry, not now. The time I was going to start. Okay, I'm going to start my speech now. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you a story of how civilization started. So let me tell you a story of how civilization started, how certain structures of thought and progress has gotten us to where we are right now. In the beginning, there was no God. Humanity existed in simplistic forms, and their largely interactions were limited to survival. And panel, humanity was very, very good at it. We are faster, we are stronger. Survival of the weak were the only rule that was constant. Death and life, while painful, were the only accidents. And the only thing between those accidents was another accident, which is human life. Panel, we killed mercilessly to the extent of our care was proximate to those that we love and to those that we care about. Panel, if you think I'm lying, consider the animal kingdom and any other forms of semi-intelligent life operate by this principle that we are once bound by. This is the distinction that we get from us. You are going to get it. At some point in lifespan, humans, for one of them, had a thought, had an experience that taught him that something greater exists beyond himself. They thought that something more than them exists within status quo. And this experience was not something he could limit to himself. It means that the only way he could validate this experience is to share it with others. And in that sharing with others, religion was born. And when this group of people came together and they decided that we don't want other people who have different experiences come and infringe on our experiences, and there was the beginning of organized religion. That is why we have organized religion in status quo right now. Panel, before this experience, we were born by simplistic natures. Records of early cavemen worshipping fire together exist in status quo. That's just for proof. So at the point where human beings saw something greater than them, that they decided to push for more as a collective body of consciousness. This motion is about humanity in general. We don't think it's very, very inclusive like that. Individuals believing in their God want something better for them. That their God, this is for the majority of all organized religions that exist in status quo, don't want them to kill senselessly. They don't want them to harm people. They don't want them to think of people as transactions or as objects of their own personal gain. They don't want people to they want people to more collectivize to the more progress of society in general. Panel, the reason why organized religion is vital is because it doesn't matter what you believe as a person,
because that brings largely no impact. If Kenneth believes he can fly, it doesn't matter that belief is. But if all of us believe Kenneth can fly, that brought about the impact that we're talking about. I'm going to explain why that belief is what got us where we are currently right now. Now, unless we collectivize together in our belief, it then means that belief has no standing. From my explanation panel, notice that the morality that human beings have was not one that was ever absolute. It means to the extent that we care, it's always to the extent that it's proximate. It's until the point that religion came that morality became something that was absolute within human nature. This debate is on the idea of better off, which means panel, government can't just remove the foundation behind civilization, live in a vacuum, and tell us that vacuum is a better world. All they prove is that religion is sometimes bad. They don't prove that humanity will be better off, which is exactly the point of this debate. What does organized religion particularly look for in status quo? This looks like things like when you have religion in state power. It means that states can't take necessarily any action, knowing because the presence of this organized institution, things like the Catholic Church, things like Christianity, are going to be able to backlash on them. It looks like religions in spaces whereby if you want to make a decision, you have to consider, even though you don't believe in God, just the idea of something like that floating around is the thing that prompts you to take the most proximate good decision. We think this is something that happens when you have the institutionalization of religion in general. What do you get from side-closing opposition as humanitarianization? The first thing I'm going to talk about is on the idea that opening governments try to run. They talk about this, but they don't explain why organized religion have the ability to do this. And that is on how it can checkmate societal change. Let's look at the current position of organized religion occupies the status quo. This looks like a true and trusted institution who does not have an ulterior motive than the progress of humanity and everything good. This is something you can't get from any other institution. The UN, states, these are institutions that depend on a calculation of morality, on a calculation of your value to determine whether they should take a particular action. It's only when you get organized religion as an institution that these guys care necessarily just about you without any other form of comparison to do. The second thing on this is that it's an avenue when human beings can rationalize themselves to be very valuable regardless of the fact of what they are. We don't think that in God's world, where I just think that I'm a good person or that I'm valuable. We don't think that's entirely very impactful as how it impacts your self-actualization. It only makes more sense when a group of people or when an institution says, okay, you're very valuable and this is something that we care about. We think that's something that exists. We think to the extent that this thing happens, that means that without the institutionalization of religion, there is no pure checkmating mechanism for this particular structure that exists in status quo. It means that institutions, how would you know that a state is particularly very harmful? You only know that because religion exists as a pure state where you can look at it and say, like, okay, this religion exists, this kind of moral codes exist, and we don't think it's something that's actually going to exist within status quo. Yeah, sure.
Guys, the problem with CEO is that they assume that these religious institutions will always be good, similar to OG's problem.
Sure. The idea is this: it's going to be a better world. In your speech, you could have explained why this could have been a better world. Because when you talk about slavery, the only reason we got slavery abolished in the first instance is because there was a belief and institution of religion. We don't think that's something that actually won outside of the world. The second I'm going to talk about is on that the absence of organized religion will exacerbate the extremism and harms of personal and other forms of collectivization. What this particularly means is that people are inherently self-dominating, and this is a competitive world. It means that if people don't have an institution that is prior to their belief, they are going to necessarily take their belief to be the law of the world. This is like people who think themselves to be them, who think specific religion, maybe they come up with their own religious beliefs, and they are going to try to push those religious beliefs to the rest of the world. It means the extremism you are going to get from this side of the world, this is like institutions that exist in status quo, who are necessarily don't have any other prior institution that's supposed to checkmate them. Because the idea with organized religion in status quo right now is that it is the prior fundamental institution that exists within status quo. We think it's something that becomes very lacking when you have this kind of instances in government's world. The second thing on this is that people are going to push to other institutions. This is like conspiracy theories. This is like ethnic institutions, supremacist bias, and conservationism. We think it's necessarily very bad because organized religion exists in a pure stance. It means that people have an option to exist within these spaces. When you take away that particular pure stance, you know that the only other institution that exists is going to be things like conspiracy theories or ethnic institutions. Why it's necessarily very bad is that when people believe in states the way they believe in organized religion, it means they are going to have a certain level of opposition. And when you have opposition within the state's internal structures, they are going to get the harms that opening government talks to you necessarily about. What you didn't get from this is that extremism is worse on their part. They are going to get human beings who don't necessarily care so much. The reason why it's very important because it's prior to all this, because regardless of all the benefits you get from all the existence of society and nothing, this is prior to the fact that human beings actually see themselves as humans. The day we stop seeing ourselves as humans, all these other benefits that are abandoned are going to be largely seen in part of opening government's world and closing of government's world. Panel, what did we get when you take away this particular instance of organized religion? When you say we are not going to exist as them, what you get from this is that you now have a society that is not policed by any force greater than itself. We think that's naturally very bad because the way people rationalize themselves, the way states rationalize its actors is to know, even to the extent that they don't believe it, or even if they don't believe it, is that there is something higher than themselves. We think that the idea of better off has to be to this extent that you say that humanity can still see themselves as a form. We beg to oppose.
Government is
All right, so are you ready? I'll be starting my speech in three. No, sorry. Six, seven. Uh-huh. All right, so I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Closing government comes to give us a history lesson as to how organized religion was formed, right? They tell you, people came together, they started sharing things, people were worshiping fire at some point in time. But understand that before that, people were actually coming together because of the benefits they could get from each other. So it means that before they started worshiping fire, there was already some form of people coming together to create basically a form of community themselves. So it means that even if they didn't worship fire, even if religion didn't exist, lots of communities would still exist regardless. So them trying to give us that history lesson do not necessarily fly, because why? Even in places like Africa, things like culture, things like ethnic groups, things like traditions already exist where people were collectively together before religions like Christianity or Islam came in, even though they already have traditional worshiping, right? The second thing they tell you, or the major thing their entire case is premised on, is that this religion is something that is good. That is why they tell you, collectivism is better in their world, or backlash is better in their world. But opening government has clearly shown that even in today's world, we've continued to see the harms propagated by organized religion in terms of the Catholic rape scandal, in terms of Islam propagating high rates of terrorism in the world. So if your entire case is premised on the best benefit on the benefit that religion provides, then you also have to concede to the fact that the harms that this organized religion has caused is something that has actually set humanity back. Panel, this is the way of like this motion. This motion is a comparative motion, and this is why we win from our side of the bench. In our world, humanity is better. Why? Because we do not say, we in our world you still have spirituality, so it means people still have conscience. It means people still believe in God. It means people would still necessarily do the things that are true. The second thing is that people are better able to actualize and self-express. Why? Because of the flexibility that comes with spiritual individuality. We do not force people to buy into our religion. Unlike what you get from organized religion, where they need that buy, like opening government tells you, they do not want people to buy, like they do not want people to opt out, or they need that buy-in. Alex tells you why that buy-in is something that is very important. Why? Because they need that large number to remain relevant. They need large number to remain relevant. So in a bid to remain relevant, that is why they keep weaponizing things like fear-mongering. That is why they keep weaponizing things like ostracization when you leave this type of organized religion. So it is more like a cult, right? And we personally have actually shown on cultism, basically. So they need to prove why they are still supporting cultism in and of itself in today's world. The last thing Alex tells you is that change is faster due to the flexibility of individuals. That is where he gives you the example of, it is easier to actually influence the pastor or the leader of a church and use that person as a tool to actually influence the multitude of people under them.
In our world where everybody has their own spiritual individuality, it is hard to get that. And that is why opening governments of, oh, these people are used as a pool of, are used as tool of politicking, or used to create, or used to propagate, sorry. Yeah. Oh, don't worry. You can continue in 3, 2, 1. This flexibility of humans is something that actually makes it hard for the government or for any other person to use these things as politicking tool. Now, coming to opening opposition. Opening all debates the motion like it is the existence of religion, whether it is good or bad. In our world of spiritual individuality, you still get most of the benefits that they try to propagate. One, people would still give charity, not necessarily because they are Christians or Muslims. People can see that, oh, this person is actually sick. Let me donate to this person. I am not donating because I am a Christian, neither am I donating because I am a Muslim. I'll probably donate because this person is Yoruba. I'll probably donate because this person is Igbo and he's my friend, and I'm still going to give to him. Human conscience still remains. Why? Because human conscience is an innate nature. It is something that comes with humans themselves. You cannot say, oh, because we do not subscribe to organized religion, you would no longer get human conscience. That is something that does not exist. And the third thing is that people would always find a sense of community, either along ethnic lines, either along cultural lines, either along work lines. People would always find a sense of community. So all the benefits that they try to co-opt from their own side, that organized religion provide, is something that you necessarily get from ours. It's something that you normally get from status quo, even without religion, but you get more benefit even when you have individual spirituality. What's your PY?
Show how the lack of a structure and institution means that these people can be easily attacked, removed, and they will be more unstable. And our analysis on different opinions proves this. Why is this better on your side of the world?
The attack and removing would only happen when these people try to force their own spiritual individuality on you. I serve my God. I don't care whether you care about my God or you do not care about my God. I am comfortable with the way I serve my person. I do not care that, oh, because you're not serving the same God as me, I would not talk to you or I would not relate with you. So I do not see why that POI of people would attack you or why that instability is something that is important. In as much as we have shown that people would always have some sense of collectivism elsewhere outside religion, under ethnic lines, under traditional lines, under cultural lines, even under work lines. All of us here, we are actually under a body of ANUDC that is not subscribed to any form of religion itself. Now, why did we wrap over our opening? What you get from our opening are a lot, but we give you the legwork as to how these things actually happen. We give you the legwork as to why religion actually needs that number, or why organized religion itself needs the number, needs that buy-in. We tell you that that buy-in is something that is very important for them to stay relevant. We tell you that it is something that is important for them to leverage as a tool of politicking. We tell you that it is something that is important for them to not go out of phase, right? We also provide you this is the way up here. In our world where religion exists on a personal level, you still get all the benefits that organized religion provides. We already tell you that, oh, people can still collectivize under different lines, like cultural or ethnic lines. People can still give to charity. Human conscience will still exist. Yes, it might be unstable, but the instability is something that is minute. As we do not care, as we do not try to enforce our own we do not try to prove the superiority of our personal religion, right? The second thing is that introspection and retrospection is actually more higher on an individual level, right? The fact that I serve God on an individual level means that I don't have to be performative about it. It means that my introspection of myself, the way I hold myself accountable, is actually based on my own self. It is not based on how the world sees me. It's not based on how a group of people sees me. Proudly, government.
Final speaker, whip of opposition. Please bring my Sorry, I'm standing in front, so I'm trying to.
Okay. Just give me a second to organize my list.
I was thinking if I could do it.
Out. Okay. Is this loud enough?
Okay, cool. I'll take prayer from closing if they have any. I begin my speech at a countdown of 3, 2, 1. Chairperson, the first thing I'm going to do in my speech is to thank the opening half for giving us an easy pathway to at least rank a second in this debate. Why? Because majority of the impact that come from the opening half is largely based on religion in and of itself. They don't uniquely distinct how religion is different from organized religion and how it's different from personal religion extensively, meaning it's unclear how you can appropriate the impact you get from both sides of the bench. But then, let's go on to individual engagement and show why we are better than each bench. Firstly, on opening opposition, two things here. One, notice that the bulk of their engagement is to say, the benefits of religion exist because one, you give people morality, but the second, you give them financial incentives. But the second thing they tell you is that, with personal religion, you get no cohesive structure, and hence these people are going to be shunned. There are two things here. One, justice is able to tell you how we are able to corrupt that morality on our side, meaning we still have those impacts there. But then secondly, justice tells you how the personal religion makes the incentive for extremist violence to be much more worse, meaning that you exacerbate conflict on their side of the world, and you exacerbate wars on their side of the world, giving people have the incentive to be self-dominating, meaning if they have personal religion, that violence is much more going to be worse. Meaning that the impact of exposing more people to wars, to harms, and to dangers is a much more bigger impact than just saying, people will get shunned at the end of the day. But then the second impact that justice tells you is that, you facilitate better social change. How? One, the analysis of how you're able to checkmate states, we think that is much more beneficial. But then secondly, given that you open up a vacuum for more extremism to exist in the status quo, hence it is very problematic. Why? Because you open more people up to pain, because people can now collectivize in that vacuum of extremism. Other things like ethnicity, other things like ideology, conspiracies, or whatsoever. Many people are more likely to be extremists in these kinds of ideologies and use it to perpetrate more violence within the society. Meaning at the end of the day, we are able to tell you how you are able to get benefits of this particular religion for morality and those kinds of things. But then secondly, in terms of the harms, on how you are able to enact large-scale wars, we think is something that comes more on our side and is a bigger impact than just morality and financial incentives that I get from opening opposition at the end of the day. Let's talk about opening government and closing government. The first thing you get from opening government is that religion is a tool for political agenda. One, this is a lie. Notice he's not giving any example because he has no empirical evidence to back this. But then secondly, it's also a lie because the biggest actor within the purview of the state that checkmates the state in and of itself is religion extensively. That is why you see the Pope call out the US government and those kinds of things. Meaning that religion actually has an incentive to stop any negative politicization within society. But then secondly, they tell you that organized religion uses individuals as a tool for fighting. That's to say terrorist organizations and all those kinds of things. Justice analyzes to you why this will even be worse when you have personal religion. Why? Because one, you open up a vacuum of extremism to thrive because individuals are self-dominating. Meaning you open up a vacuum of extremism in different kinds of collectivization. Something that religion checks because the incentive for an Igbo man to not be at least to reduce his violence to Yoruba man is the fact that both of them are Christians. The intersection of religion between different kinds of collectivization is what helps individuals to keep that violence they have within each other, prejudice they have within each other in check. Meaning that when you remove religion, you open up this particular vacuum, meaning people are more likely to have wars against each other. But then secondly, organized religion has a structure to even checkmate this particular thing. That's to say, it speaks out against extremism and those kinds of things. Meaning that this checkmating mechanism that exists on our side is much more better than our world compared to what you get to that side. There's literally no checkmates there. But then the third thing then is that they say, there's an incentive for power abuse. Why? Because people don't want to speak against their state because of religion and they don't want to speak against their monarch. The first thing here is that this is not true. Why? Because the reason why people don't want to speak against their government is because it's an authoritarian rule. It's an authoritarian rule. You'll most likely get killed. That is why they don't speak against monarchs and those kind of authoritarian governments. Not because they think, they are from God. Like, let's be realistic. But then secondly, the empirical evidence in Nigeria calling out states proves that despite the fact that religion exists, people still call out states like, how can you literally lie when we all reside in Nigeria? Stupid argument. But then the first thing that they tell you is that, you give preachers more power. And this also comes from closing. Panel, all the criminal acts of religion are always investigated and prosecuted by the state. The only way you can buy that premise is if they prove that the state is inefficient in prosecuting this religion, rather than just basing their arguments off of failed democracies. Like, you need to debate through an ideal lens. Be realistic for God's sake. But then the fifth thing they tell you from opening governments and why they are very irrelevant to this debate is that, you create echo chambers of justifying abhorrent and oppressive acts like killing of gay people and ostracizing women. Individual perception, tribal beliefs, abhorrent cultural practices, which religion even helped, organized religion even helped like erode, are the sources of those conservative views. Meaning that as long as you have those things, those conservative views will still exist, and they are even going to be worse in the status quo. But then secondly, an individual that has personal religion can harbor all these kinds of harmful beliefs in themselves. They don't tell you why they won't harbor those beliefs in themselves. And we think it's even very much problematic extensively. But then this is better on our world, right? Because religion has an institution to checkmate these harms, to remove traditional practices that are harmful as they did so in Africa, but then integrating liberal ideals that encourage individuals to respect other kinds of identities. Like Pope Francis telling individuals that Catholics and other kinds of Christians to respect gay people. Other religions are also integrating liberal ideals within the status quo, which means we think it is beneficial and their harms are no longer existence. But then the last two things here, okay, but then let's go to closing government, right? Because that logic kicks off opening government out of this debate. Again, you don't engage how this is uniquely distinct in personal religion. You just talk about religion as a whole. But in terms of closing government, the first thing here is that most of their impact is based on individuals cannot opt out. Two reasons why we think individuals can opt out. One, this argument would have run if probably this was 1852 or something. But this is the liberal status quo. This is 2025. One, the ever-growing emergence of atheism means that the emergence of atheist communities, which creates a fallback mechanism of opt-out, exists in the society. Atheist communities exist. But then two, there's a normalization to an extent because there's a rise of continuous opt-out of religion, meaning the normalization and atheist communities creates a fallback mechanism for individuals to opt out to the liberal status quo, meaning that structures exist to enable individuals to opt out. That argument can only run if probably this debate occurred in 1852. But then secondly, they say they don't want their institution to be threatened. They don't want their institution to be threatened. That's why they challenge changes in the society, especially scientific changes. But no, this is stupid. We already have please shut the fuck up. Please, we already have people within the society that challenge this particular anti-intellectual individuals. We have anti-intellectual individuals that always checkmate inventions. Why? Because every invention is premised on the fact that you are going to oppress a certain group of people through things like climate change activities or whatsoever. And this is what religion is always trying to prevent. It's always trying to checkmate all kinds of inventions to ensure it's not extremely oppressive in itself. And we think this is something that is very problematic. It's something that has enabled these inventions to not be oppressive in its entirety, meaning it has protected lives and it was not traded off industrialization because of money. But then the last thing you get from closing government is that they say it affects the nature of interactions both personally on an international scale. Panel, in a state with different religions, those states are mostly secular, meaning they are obliged to respect other kinds of religion that exist within that particular state. Meaning that they now have to prove why the CJS and those kinds of democratic systems don't allow these people to properly or adequately respect each other extensively. Meaning that most of the impacts on closing governments are just assertive, as long as they don't prove that the CJS is inefficient to checkmate the religion from being oppressive to the people that exist within those particular states. Panel, it is simple. When you remove religion, you open up a vacuum of extremism that exacerbates wars, exacerbates violence through other forms of collectivization that exist in society. And that's the extension that wins this debate from closing opposition.
Please go straight to the news calls. We need to please just go. Good night. Thank you.